Hello, and welcome to this episode of Security Journal UK Leaders in Security podcast series. I'm your host, Millie Marshall-Loughran. I'm Deputy Editor of Security Journal UK. In this episode, I'm joined with Adam Savage from Barker's Fencing. We will be discussing the standards and knowledge gaps and the recent changes to the NPSA. Thank you so much for joining me today, Adam. How are you?
Yep, really good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. So should we get into the questions?
Yeah, please, fire away.
Brilliant. So would you be able to just introduce yourself, your job role, and a little bit about Barker's Fencing?
Yeah, sure. As you've already said, my name's Adam Savage. I'm the Marketing and Sales Director for the company. I've been there for over 25 years now, so plenty of experience in physical perimeter security. And as a company, we've evolved a lot. Many years ago, we produced as many, if not more, meters of fence than anywhere else in the UK, potentially at times anyone in Europe. But a lot of that was relatively lower margin, basic fencing. And in the last 10 or 15 years, we've been working more on security standard testing, higher security products. We have a range of crash-rated products. So nowadays, that makes up the vast majority of our business. We have some really key core markets, all to do with critical national infrastructure, both in the UK and abroad. And in the last few years, we've done more and more export. I think it's fair to say that British, UK-based security companies in general, especially in the physical security space, we've lived with a threat from different types of domestic terrorism since, arguably the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And that's led to the UK having some of the best security minds, people, products in the world. So we export a heck of a lot of that. Well over half of what we manufacture, we export around the world. And a couple of years ago, last year rather, we won the King's Award for Enterprise in the international trade category. So yeah, all really positive from us.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. So how has your career journey shaped your perspective on security standards, market needs and innovations?
Well, in 25 years, as you can imagine, I've seen quite a lot of changes. Every single side, I suppose, really, from the technical rigour required for compliance and good security up to the commercial urgency to deliver fast, the commercial urgency to have cheap sometimes cheap, sometimes cost-effective product, whichever way you look at it. And I think really what we're good at is the real skill in all that is bridging those worlds of compliance and rigour, but cost effectiveness, and not choosing between them. I think it's very, very easy to create the best, biggest, strongest fence in the world, but nobody wants it because it's simply unaffordable and impractical. Or you go the other way and you stack it high, sell it cheap. Neither of those are what we want to do. We bridge that gap and give people something which is really effective, can meet their needs, and hopefully as cost effective as possible. We're never going to be the cheapest solution out there by any stretch, but we give people something appropriate. In terms of standards, we obviously don't write the standards, but we have to stay really, really close to them. We'd like to think that we fully understand them. I think that's really crucial because a security team may have a lot of things to understand. They've got their security systems, the people aspect, alarms, electronic security, physical security, building security, processes, all of this. That they may not be experts in what we are at, which is physical perimeter security, gates, turnstiles, fences, barriers, blockers, bollards, all that kind of stuff. So we understand deeply the standards such as LPS 1175. We then figure out how those products can be used within that standard, not just how you build a product to pass the test. This is how you build a product which can then be used in practice. And it's that kind of really deep understanding that helps you give good advice to your client so that they can make good decisions, because ultimately it is their decision. We always encourage people to talk to a proper security consultant because we're not that. We don't pretend to be. But we give them, as good advice as we can from our perspective.
Yeah, it must be quite difficult with the legislation, constantly changing, because you're going to need to improve your standards a lot. But also, you mentioned a really important note about, although those legalities are in place, you don't want to just abide by that. You almost want to go the step above and make sure that you are abiding by and surpassing those premises.
Yeah, 100%. I think we see people, I'll probably end up talking about this quite a lot. We see people who design a fence or a gate or a barrier, and maybe it's not a particularly easy thing to install. Maybe it's not particularly cost effective, but it gives them that kind of rubber stamp to say, oh, look at what we can do. And that's great. And it does prove that you've got, really good design capabilities, etc., etc. But it has to be so much more than that. It can't be just about the product.
So how important are accreditations in building trust with clients in sectors like data centers, utilities, and CNI?
Well, really important. But to me, they're the beginning of trust, not the whole story. As I've just said, lots of people have got tested and approved products. And sometimes you'll see a client says, I want a product to meet this standard tick. And they've already done a huge amount of due diligence. They don't actually need a great deal of hand-holding. So yeah, you can offer them a product and that's all they need. But more often than not, it's more than that. Trust starts to occur when it matters, which is how you behave after those initial conversations. The advice you give them. We see lots of occasions where clients ask for example, a crash-rated fence. And we challenge them because a crash-rated fence isn't really necessary in that particular area of their site, or you look at it and you think, well, there's very little vehicular access, so it's not necessary. Always just try to push back, because if you help your client, then that trust aspect means you're going to get repeat business, and ultimately it's a two-way thing. We give good business. We hope people come back to us more and more often because they trust us. Beyond that, there's a big piece about longevity. The more entrants into the higher security market that there'll be ultimately a lot of questions about quality, about imported product. Just because of a fence or a gate passed that test today when it was tested, will it do so in 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years time? There are lots of new entrants to the market, and some of these companies are really good. They're doing things the right way. Some of them maybe not so much, but there are plenty of manufacturers such as ourselves. We're not the only ones who've been around for an awfully long time. Really good track record. We lean heavily into that British manufacturing side of things, so people can trust us, trust our quality and the longevity. I think as an industry, we have to be careful that certifications don't kind of just become a comfort blanket, that there's a certificate, it ticks the box, so that's all we need, because we need, it's a bigger, wider conversation about the security, the effective security of a site. A lot of it not really to do with us. But having these kind of conversations, I've learned more about lighting and how it affects security on sites over the last few years, and having these wider conversations than I ever thought I would. So yeah, it has to be more than certification, but it's a really crucial step.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because people aren't you always presume that someone is aware of these things, as you was talking about the crash fencing, you presume that people are knowledgeable, but actually that could, for example, if you was going to do it in a school, that could just be an assistant and they don't know about fencing situations. So it's really good that you offer that advice, because again, like you said, like you want customers to be loyal and you want them to come back, and that not everyone's so clued up on these standards as obviously you guys are. So yeah,
absolutely. Even some security consultants have a specialism. You look at some of the big multidisciplinary companies, the Cundalls, the Jacobs, the Arabs of this world. They have a security team. There may in some of those teams be a physical security expert, but in a lot of them they aren't. And that's fine. There's absolutely no problem. Not criticising that, because you can't be an expert in everything. We spend a lot of time with architects, and architects can't be an expert in security, but they at times are charged with drawing this onto a scheme. So they need, it's really good, and the best outcomes we ever see are when there's early engagement, so people can understand what the security requirements are from the site security team and whatever assessments have been done. They can understand what potential products are out there, how they'll perform, but not only that, how they'll fit on the perimeter, how they'll be installed. There are some instances where certain fences or certain gates, depending on the topography of the ground or the way that the ground falls at an entrance, product A may not work particularly well, whereas product B, there might be another compromise, but it works a lot better in terms of day-to-day operation. So yeah, it's a big subject.
Brilliant, thank you. So as marketing and sales director, how do you translate technical standards into accessible messaging that resonates with specifiers, consultants and installers?
We try to, as we've talked about, give good advice, but we produce a lot of content on LinkedIn and YouTube, trying to explain standards as clearly and as simply as we can. I always say to people, I'm a simple man, so I try to explain things, and sometimes simple isn't the right word. I think the key to it is making the message and the information contextual so that people understand it. Simple can be misconstrued as though you're dumbing it down. That's not what anybody needs to do.
More accessible, isn't it? You're making it easy for people to digest that aren't in that field.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, these people don't necessarily need a physics lesson to understand how or why a standard applies, or how and why. We see a lot of conflicting standards. People mention BS 1722, which is really a design-based construction standard, which tells you to produce a fence, for example, to a sufficient standard that it doesn't fall over. It doesn't really give you any guidance as to how long you should make that barrier stop an intruder for. But occasionally we see that used in a direct relation to a standard such as NPSA or LPS 1175, and the two are completely different. So it's trying to simplify that message so people understand. And I suppose, so a lot of content. You asked how we translate that into accessible messaging. A lot of it is the content that we produce, the conversations that we have. We do a lot of CPDs. And in meetings, always try to start with questions, understanding what the client is protecting, from whom, what kind of time delay they need, what their response looks like, just making sure we all understand the needs of the site, and then we can all speak the same language about the security.
So could you just describe the NPSA to us a little bit more and what its function is?
Yeah, sure. So the NPSA is the National Protective Security Authority. It used to be called the CPNI, which was the Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure. It's had a rebrand, and I think that its remit might have changed a little bit. There might be a little bit more influence with some cyber threats, but effectively it's for physical and personnel protective security. So it has one foot in the counter-terrorism and state threat world, and it provides a lot of advice to businesses, organisations, critical national infrastructure, whether it be water treatment works, etc., anywhere regarded as critical national infrastructure, of which there's, I think, 14 or 15 different categories, from data centres to water treatment works, power generation, etc. So they provide a lot of good advice. I think recently they've provided more and more online videos to simplify what they do and to try and give people good advice. And ultimately, I think its overarching aim is to make the UK less vulnerable and more resilient to security threats. So from a perspective from a product manufacturer such as Barker's, we have products listed on their website. They have something called the CSE, the Catalogue of Security Equipment. And so if you are the security manager or involved with a CNI site, you can go on there and see which products are approved. Now, I know we'll talk a little bit more about the CSE, but it's not really an ideal system because the MFES attack testing, manual forced entry testing, for the products that go in the CSE, there's primarily three different levels. It doesn't tell you which level on the website on the CSE a product is designed to and has passed. So you could go on there as a bit of a layman, choose a product, but you don't actually know what the test is, what security level it is. So there's a little bit of ambiguity. My feeling is always that because it's a government authority, unless you are within one of those CNI sectors, it's very difficult to get the information. I personally, I've always thought it would be better if this was a little bit more transparent. I do understand the reasons why it isn't, that they don't want to give away too many secrets, but it does sometimes create a little bit of a conflict.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So how have recent developments at the NPSA shaped the way Barker's approaches design, specification and client engagement?
Well, first of all, the NPSA have announced that starting, I believe, 1st of January 2026, the CSE, that's the catalogue of security equipment, fencing and gates that are not crash rated, will be removed from that standard, which leaves a bit of a hole in how fences and gates are specified and recommended to critical national infrastructure. For me, it's a really good thing. And I think one of the main reasons, and I've been quite vocal about this over the last few years, is that I may have the date slightly wrong, but broadly speaking, the NPSA, formerly CPNI, haven't tested any new gates or fences since about 2016-17. So it's a long time, and there's been a lot of technological development in the product. There's been a lot of developments in tooling. The power of drill or saw that you can buy on the market today that's battery powered is a heck of a lot more powerful than it was a decade ago. So we think it's really, really positive. We hope and will push towards standards such as the LPCB's LPS 1175, because that is more frequently updated than the old NPSA standard. So I think it's good news. I think there are better products on the market now, newer innovations than were on the CSE, and I hope it kind of leads us towards a newer era of agile, industry-led assurance, but still using standards such as LPS 1175. I think trust will form a big part of it. We don't want companies who see this as a big opportunity to get involved in a growing market, and what they do is they start to sell products which are described as to the principles of LPS 1175, or I've seen claims where people say on their literature, we're working towards achieving LPS 1175. If you're uninitiated, and as we've just said, architects, specifiers, clients don't necessarily fully understand the standard, rightly so, they could read that claim and it makes them think, well, it's pretty much the same, they're working towards it, or it's to the principle of.
And it's not, yeah. Anyone could say that.
Absolutely. Self-certification is not the way to go. We see that in lots of other industries. I talk to people in other industries as well about self-certification. It's a pain point in lots of industries, and I hope that that's not the way that we end up in security. What we want to be doing is, data, proof, collaboration, and crucially experience, I think, is a really, really important thing. On the NPSA side of things, I don't expect it to be the NPSA's end of involvement in discussing what kind of security measures should be taken on CNI sites. I just hope that they lean clients, either they're going to make recommendations on security levels within a standard such as LPS 1175, or they direct them to the right partners, consultants, and standards.
Brilliant, thank you so much. How will NPSA's upcoming shift away from the manual forced entry standard and its new security culture tool influence Barker's fencing, next generation product strategies and client engagement?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think this is going towards what a lot of really good security experts within the industry talk about all the time. You hear buzzwords like holistic security, etc., etc. But a really rounded approach that recognises that security, and I am mainly talking about the perimeter here, but security isn't just mesh and metal. It's much deeper than that. It's the people, the process, the mindset, the fact that every single person within the organisation has an influence on the security of the sites. Lots of people talk an awful lot about insider threats, about, on every site there are some people, whether it be the security guard or the janitor or someone who could leave a gate open, they're often the lowest paid person on the site. They're the ones that, if there's going to be any social engineering, as they call it, going on, they're the ones at risk. And we have to be open about that, because I don't like saying the fence isn't the most important thing, but ultimately the fence, you can have the best fence in the world if you've got an insider threat and or your process or your reaction time isn't up to scratch. So yeah, I think there's a lot to consider. In a way, it doesn't really change our strategy. The security culture tool is great and goes into a lot more depth about some of the things that we talk about anyway. But we'll continue to try and give good, honest advice. We walk away from orders if they aren't the right thing for the client. We advise them on products that aren't even ours sometimes. I had a client call me only a couple of days ago. Well, he's not a client really. He's a consultant that I know, and he was told to give me a call to ask a few questions. It was on a data center site that doesn't even have our fence on, and he wasn't sure that it was appropriate. And I went through it with him, did some rough engineering calculations on the base plate sizes, confirmed that actually it's okay, unless the client, and I know the client, but unless the client for this site is going to say they want a different standard, what is currently specified, it does fit the bill, which is a shame because there's nothing in it for me, but it was the right thing to say and do. So we'll continue to give that good, honest advice, and try to encourage people to link it strongly to culture. Training is a big factor. Maintenance of product. Keep talking about the fact that security isn't static. It's a living, breathing system. And what I hope is that, we do this a lot, and there are some other good manufacturers out there. As I said, there are some new entrants. What I hope is that manufacturers and the industry evolve to be educators, not just suppliers, not just salespeople, because ultimately clients will and do look to people such as ourselves to give them help, not just compliance and tick boxing. I suppose really not a huge change for us, but I think it will see a shift in the industry. In the short term, there may be one or two challenges as people think that this is, perhaps a gold rush is the wrong word, but people are going to see that there's money to be made here. And I think unless people are picking the right partners, consultants, architects are doing a little bit more due diligence, there might be one or two instances where people catch a cold. But in the long term, I'd like to think that the industry will professionalise a lot more.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. It's been really interesting speaking to you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we've got across everything that are my views, that really the future of security, not just post-NPSA, but in general, future of physical security really is confidence for clients. And I feel strongly that confidence comes from understanding, not just from compliance.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you also to our listeners for tuning into Security Journal UK's Lead in Security podcast series. I've been your host, Millie Marshall-Loughran, and make sure to keep an eye out for our next episode coming soon. Thank you.